He kissed me at the door and said, "Go have fun. You deserve a night with your friends." I smiled, told him I loved him, and walked away, never imagining that a single night could turn into something I'd carry for the rest of my life. It started with music and laughter, champagne, and old stories. A girls' night out we'd joked about for weeks. But somewhere between the third drink and the fifth ignored message, I stopped feeling like a wife. And by the time I realized what I'd done, I was waking up in a stranger's bed, wondering if this was the moment my life quietly split in two. This is the confession of a woman who swore it would never happen. Until it did. I still remember exactly how he said it. He stood at the door in his usual worn-out gray hoodie, hair still damp from the shower, our son clinging to his leg. He smiled and said, "Have fun tonight. Seriously, you deserve it." Then he kissed my cheek, handed me my purse, and told me not to worry about anything at home. "I got bedtime handled," he said with a wink. It was so normal, so trusting, so perfectly him. I smiled, told him I loved him, and drove off thinking I'd be home before midnight. I wasn't. And the version of me that came back wasn't the one who left. It was Jenna's bachelorette party. She was the last of our little group to get married, and she wanted one last no-regrets night. The kind you can laugh about years later. A fancy dinner, too many drinks, and a bar crawl through downtown Nashville. It wasn't wild by anyone else's standards, but for women who hadn't been out together in years, who had jobs and kids and full calendars, it felt like freedom. The drinks flowed fast. First, a round of champagne, then shots. Then these sugary pink cocktails with names I don't remember but kept ordering anyway because they went down easy. Music was blasting, the bar was packed, and somewhere around midnight, everything got fuzzy. I wasn't blackout drunk, but I was something else. Blurry, loose, weightless. And then there was him. I don't even remember his name. I'm not proud of that. I don't remember how we started talking or what I said to make him lean closer. I don't remember if I flirted first. Maybe I laughed too long at a joke. Maybe I touched his arm. Maybe I just didn't move away when he touched mine. All I know is that one moment I was at the bar with Jenna's friends, and the next I was outside on the sidewalk, standing way too close to a man I didn't know. He asked if I needed help getting a ride. I said, "Maybe." He said, "There's a hotel around the corner if you want to just crash for a few hours." And God help me, I didn't say no. I followed. I followed a stranger into a building I didn't recognize, down a hallway that didn't feel real, into a room that smelled like bleach and bad decisions. I sat on the edge of the bed while he poured cheap whiskey into paper cups. We didn't talk much. There wasn't a lot of romance. It wasn't slow or passionate or meaningful. It was clumsy, quick, a mistake happening in real time. I remember thinking, he'll never know. Then I remember thinking, what am I doing? Then I remember waking up. It was still dark when I opened my eyes. He was asleep, facing the wall. I was still in my dress from the night before. One strap twisted, my makeup smeared. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I moved. I didn't say goodbye. I left the hotel barefoot, holding my heels in one hand, my phone dead in the other. I called an Uber from the lobby, heart pounding, nausea curling in my gut that had nothing to do with the alcohol anymore. When I got home, the house was dark, quiet. I stood in the kitchen and cried silently until the sun came up. Then I tiptoed into the bathroom, showered, scrubbed my skin raw, and crawled into bed beside my husband, who shifted in his sleep and murmured, "You're home." He didn't even open his eyes. And I laid there, eyes wide open, trying to remember who I used to be. The next day, I told him I stayed with Jenna. He smiled and said, "Smart move. You looked wiped out when you left." I nodded. Yeah, it was a lot. He kissed me on the forehead and said he was glad I had fun. And I felt like I was drowning in kindness I didn't deserve. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jenna, not the other girls. No one asked. No one suspected. And why would they? I was the reliable one. The married one. The mom. I went to work, picked up my kid, did the groceries, folded the laundry. From the outside, everything was the same. But inside, something cracked. Because I had done something I never thought I was capable of. And worse, I didn't know why. Was I angry? Number, was I neglected? Number, was I bored? Not really. Did I still love my husband? God, yes. But somewhere between the third cocktail and the seventh text I didn't answer that night, I gave myself permission to break everything we had. And I told myself it didn't count because I didn't know his name. Because I didn't plan it. Because I woke up full of regret. But none of that mattered. Because I did it. And nothing I told myself after that could make it untrue. For 2 weeks, I lived like it hadn't happened. I threw myself into routine. Work, pickup, bedtime, laundry. I stayed close to my husband. Closer than usual, like proximity could undo what I'd done. I was affectionate. Hyper-present. I laughed harder, touched him more. Overcompensating, I guess. But it didn't come from calculation. It came from guilt. Deep, nauseating guilt that settled under my skin like a second layer of sweat. I thought if I just stayed busy enough, I could outpace it. That it would sink and settle like a stone at the bottom of a lake. I didn't want to think about that night again. About the hotel. About the man whose name I never asked. I didn't want to think about the look in my husband's eyes when he told me he missed me while I was gone. The softness. The belief. So I buried it. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-off, a thing that lived and died in that hotel room. But then I saw him again. I was at Target of all places, picking up laundry detergent and crackers. My son was in the cart, humming something off-key. I turned down the paper goods aisle, and there he was. The man. Same scruffy jaw, same careless walk, pushing a cart like he had every right to be there. He looked up and saw me, and I swear I felt the blood leave my body. My knees locked. I couldn't breathe. He did a double take, then smiled. Just a little. Nothing sleazy. Just recognition. Then he nodded. A small, almost respectful gesture. Like we were strangers who'd once shared a secret and agreed to never speak of it again. He walked past me like I was anyone. Didn't say a word. Didn't look back. And that should have been it. But it wasn't. Because the moment I got to my car, heart still pounding, hands shaking as I loaded the trunk, my phone buzzed. I didn't know how. Maybe my number was saved. Maybe I had texted him that night. But there it was. Didn't expect to see you again. Hope you're okay. I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have blocked him, deleted the message, gone home and doubled down on pretending. But I didn't. I answered. You too. Nothing else. Just that. But it was enough. That night, I barely slept. I laid next to my husband in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. He reached for me at one point, pulled me close, murmured something about how nice it was to have me back in his arms. I smiled in the dark, but I felt nothing, or maybe too much. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. The next day, he texted again. Still thinking about you. And again, I could have shut it down. But instead, I wrote back, You don't even know me. His reply was almost instant. That night said otherwise. I hated that I smiled when I read it. I hated that something in me lit up. Because I had been trying so hard to believe it hadn't meant anything. That I'd been too drunk to know what I was doing. That I hadn't been me. But clearly I had been. Enough to remember. Enough to be remembered? We texted for 2 days before I asked the question I knew I shouldn't. Did you know I was married? Yeah, he wrote. I saw your ring. And that didn't stop you? Didn't stop you either. I sat with that for a while. Then I texted, that was supposed to be a mistake. He said, then let it stay one. And for a minute, I thought maybe that would be the end. But 2 days later, I met him again. It wasn't planned. Or maybe it was, deep down. I told my husband I needed to go shopping alone. Said I wanted to take a walk, clear my head, do something just for me. He smiled, handed me the keys, said he'd keep the kiddo busy and to take my time. I met the stranger in a parking lot behind a quiet strip of businesses that had already closed for the day. We sat in his car. No music, no words for the first 5 minutes. Then I kissed him. This time I was sober. And this time I knew exactly what I was doing. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't even take off our clothes. But the kiss was deeper, longer, heavier. It wasn't about the physical anymore. It was about the power, the pull. The way he looked at me like I was something dangerous and wanted anyway. I went home after. My husband was on the couch with our son asleep against his chest. He looked up, smiled. Everything okay? I nodded. Yeah, just needed a reset. And he said the one thing that cut the deepest. I'm glad you have time for yourself. You deserve that. I didn't tell myself it was love. I wasn't that deluded. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. Not in the way it had been the first night when alcohol blurred every moral line I thought I'd drawn. This was something different. Something colder. Sharper. Like I'd found a pressure valve I hadn't known I needed to release. After that kiss in the parking lot, I started texting him more. Never long messages. Never during family time. Always short. Controlled. Distant. But I checked my phone more often. I looked for his name. And when I saw it, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Chosen. Not needed. Not expected. Just wanted. It's hard to explain how something can feel both wrong and like a relief. But that's exactly what it was. A wrongness that let me breathe. I wasn't unhappy at home. My husband was kind, present, loyal. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was good. Steady. Safe. Predictable. Maybe too predictable. I had started to feel like someone's mom, someone's wife, someone's schedule keeper and laundry folder and birthday planner. I loved my family. That never changed. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being seen as a woman. Or maybe I'd stopped seeing myself as one. And then this stranger came along, looked at me once, and made me feel like I had a secret worth keeping. We didn't meet again for a couple weeks. I avoided it on purpose. I told myself once was enough, that it was just a spark from a broken place and I wasn't going to burn everything down. But the thought of him didn't leave. He'd text things like, thinking about that kiss, or tell me not to come see you. And I wouldn't answer right away. But I always answered. Eventually. The third time I saw him, I was the one who initiated it. I told my husband I was helping Jenna plan her honeymoon surprise for her fiancé. A small lie. Harmless on the surface. He didn't question it. Gave me a kiss on the forehead and told me I was a good friend. I met the stranger at a motel this time. Not the same one as before. A different one, a little nicer, a little more hidden. I paid in cash. Told myself that was smart. Not shameful. He was already there when I arrived. Leaned against the wall by the vending machine, arms crossed like he belonged there. We didn't talk much. This time it was physical. Fully. Completely. I took off my ring. Not because I forgot it, but because I didn't want it pressing into his skin. I told myself that was mercy. That I was sparing him the reminder. It was slower this time. Sober. Intentional. It felt less like an accident and more like a choice I'd been building toward for weeks. After I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I drove home in silence, stopped for gas, picked up takeout, walked through the front door like nothing had happened. My husband smiled when I came in. How was it? I kissed his cheek. Productive. He thanked me for dinner. We ate on the couch while our son played with Legos on the floor. And I felt like I was watching my own life through a screen. Later that night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and waited to feel the guilt. The crushing, unbearable guilt I'd felt after the first time. It didn't come. And that scared me more than anything. Because if I could do this and still sleep, what did that mean about the person I had become? I thought about stopping, cutting it off completely, blocking the number, throwing myself at my husband and telling him I'd been lost, confused, stupid, that I didn't recognize myself. But none of that was true. I did recognize myself. Maybe for the first time in years. That was the worst part. The next morning, I woke up early and sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. I typed a message to the stranger and deleted it, then typed it again. We can't keep doing this. He replied, then say goodbye. I didn't, because I didn't want to. I don't believe in signs, but that morning felt like one. It started normal. A Saturday, bright and lazy. My husband made waffles with Mason while I lingered in bed, pretending to still be asleep just to listen to the quiet clatter of dishes and their shared laughter. It should have been a perfect moment, one of those little flashes of domestic joy that remind you what matters. But I wasn't fully there. I hadn't been in weeks. We had friends coming over later that day. Jenna and her fiancé, now her husband, the ones whose bachelorette party had started all of this. I hadn't seen her since. We'd exchanged a few texts, some vague congratulations after her honeymoon, but I avoided any real conversation. Too much risk. Too many questions I didn't want to answer. She showed up around 3 with a bottle of wine and a dozen photos on her phone she couldn't wait to show us. We got some crazy ones from that night. She laughed, already pulling out her phone as we settled on the back patio. I felt my stomach tighten. I had no idea what she had captured. I hadn't thought about pictures. I'd been too caught up in surviving the day after. My husband sat beside me, beer in hand, relaxed and happy, while Jenna scrolled through her phone. Here's us at the first bar, she said, turning the screen. There we were, arms wrapped around each other, red-faced from the drinks, wide smiles. He laughed. That's my girl. I tried to smile too. Then she flicked one more photo over, and my heart stopped. It was blurry, low light, clearly taken without us knowing. But there I was, unmistakable in my black dress, leaning close to a man whose hand rested just a little too familiarly on my lower back. You couldn't see his face clearly, just the shape of him, the suggestion of proximity. But I knew. I remembered that exact moment. It was before the hotel, outside the bar, right before I followed him into the dark. Oh, Jenna said, tapping the screen. That must be one of the guys from the bar. You were talking to him for a while. She laughed, casual. You two looked deep in conversation. My husband leaned in. I felt my whole body go cold. He looked at the photo and laughed. Who's that guy? He looks like he's about to tell you your fortune. I forced a laugh. No idea. Probably just someone asking for directions. Jenna giggled. You were pretty gone at that point. He nudged me. Did you flirt with some poor drunk dude while I was home changing diapers? I smiled too wide. Please, I could barely stand. He grinned and kissed my cheek. As long as you came home to me. The moment passed. But it didn't pass for me. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. I laughed when I needed to. Poured wine, passed snacks, played hostess. But the whole time my brain was screaming. That photo could have ruined everything. If the angle had been different. If the lighting was better. If she had caught even a second later. We might not be sitting here smiling right now. After they left, I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. It wasn't just fear. It was the realization that I was no longer in control. I had told myself I was smart, careful, invisible. But I wasn't. I was one friend's camera roll away from losing everything. I picked up my phone and stared at it. "We're done," I typed. "This isn't safe. I can't do this anymore." I hit send. No reply. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that. And still, I waited. Because ending it felt more like a pause than a conclusion. Like a door I wasn't sure I had closed all the way. And I hated myself for that. That night, my husband crawled into bed beside me and wrapped his arm around my waist. "I missed you today," he whispered. "I was here all day." "Not really," he said gently. "You felt far away." I didn't answer, because I didn't have the words for the distance I had created. He kissed the back of my neck and said, "Come back to me." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months I wanted to, but I didn't know how. Not yet. I made a quiet promise to myself the day after Jenna left. I was going to fix it. No more messages, no more lies, no more excuses. I would be the woman my husband thought I was. The mother my son deserved. The person I used to believe I was before everything cracked. So I deleted the stranger's number, not just from my contacts, but from my phone's memory. I cleared out our messages, photos, anything that might pull me back into that shadow version of my life. It wasn't that I thought deleting evidence made me innocent. I just couldn't bear to have the reminders staring back at me every time I opened my phone. It was like trying to break a habit by cleaning out the kitchen. For a while, it worked. I threw myself into home life with a kind of desperate intensity. I cooked real dinners again, not just frozen pizza or takeout. I started folding laundry the same day I washed it. I planned a weekend at a cabin upstate, booked it as a surprise for my husband, packed board games and snacks, and thought, maybe if we could just have a few days alone together, I'd remember what it felt like to belong to only him. And there were moments, small, fragile moments, when I did. When he wrapped his arms around me after Mason went to bed, or when we lay on the couch watching something dumb, laughing at nothing. Sometimes I'd look at him and feel this ache of love, so sharp it scared me. Like I could see the version of us we used to be, still alive in flickers, still reachable if I just stayed steady. But there was something else underneath all that. A silence I couldn't shake. Not between us, but inside me. Something hollowed out, something dimmed. I'd hear him say, "I love you," and I'd say it back, but the words didn't land the same way. They felt rehearsed, not because they weren't true, but because I didn't feel worthy of them anymore. The truth sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't cough up. Every day I didn't confess felt like I was sealing it in deeper. But telling him? That wasn't about redemption. That was about destruction. I knew it wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't cleanse me. It would just pour acid into a life we'd worked so hard to build. So I stayed quiet and tried to overcompensate. Again. I started initiating intimacy more, hoping it would somehow reconnect us. Sometimes it felt real. Most of the time, I was performing for someone I used to be. I think he noticed, but he didn't push. Maybe he was just grateful we were close again. Maybe he didn't want to risk losing that version of me by asking too many questions. But even when we were skin to skin, I couldn't stop remembering. The motel sheets. The way the stranger had looked at me without any history. Without any expectation. Like I was a new story instead of an old one. And that terrified me. Because if I could still want that feeling, what did it say about the life I'd built? A month passed. Then another. I thought the silence meant closure. That the other man had moved on. That whatever we were, or weren't, had finally dissolved. I started to believe I was in the clear. Until one morning, while scrolling through Instagram during my son's nap, I saw his name. Not tagged, not posted, just liked. He had liked a photo Jenna posted from a recent group dinner, a dinner I hadn't gone to, a dinner he must have been near, maybe even attended. I clicked his profile before I could stop myself. It was private, but the bio hadn't changed. Same city, same initials. He was still there, still watching, still close enough to press like. And all the calm I'd rebuilt collapsed in a single second, because he hadn't disappeared. He had just waited. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My husband asked if I was feeling sick. I told him I was tired. He offered to take the next day off so I could rest. I nearly cried from the kindness, and all I could think was, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve him. But I stayed silent again, because what else could I do? Confess and destroy him? Or live with the lie and destroy myself slowly, one day at a time? I had convinced myself it was buried, that I'd won, that the secret had grown old and quiet, like a dying ember no one would notice unless they got too close. I stopped checking his profile. I stopped looking at old messages. I stopped staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep pretending. Life rolled forward like it always does. School drop-offs, work emails, doctor appointments, grocery lists. One day bled into the next, and the version of me that had stood in a motel mirror wiping off her lipstick felt like a stranger from a darker timeline. And then Jenna called. It was casual at first. She wanted to know if we could come over that weekend. Just a barbecue, she said. A few couples. Kids welcome. I said yes without thinking. It wasn't until she said, "Oh, and remember that guy you were chatting with at my bachelorette? He might be there too," that my pulse stopped dead. I asked her what she meant. My voice stayed even, but inside I could hear the walls of my little world starting to creak. She laughed. "The guy from the bar, you two talked for like an hour. I think he was into you." "I don't even remember him," I said flatly. "Well, he remembered you," she said. "I saw him last week at a birthday party. He asked if you were still married." Still married. Not, "How are you?" Not, "How's your kid?" Not even, "What's her name?" Still married. That was all he wanted to know. I told her we had a conflict, that we couldn't make it, that we'd love to come next time. She didn't press. She never did. But the damage was already done. My heart didn't stop racing for hours. I went to bed that night knowing it wasn't over. Not really. You don't just wipe out something like that, no matter how hard you try. Secrets have a way of finding cracks, of leaking through even when you think the lid is sealed tight. What I didn't expect was for my husband to bring it up 3 days later. We were sitting on the couch. Mason had fallen asleep on my lap. The TV was on, but we weren't watching. He looked at me for a long time before he said anything. Then, quietly, "Did something happen when you were at Jenna's party?" I didn't move. "What do you mean?" "Someone said something," he said. "That you were really close with some guy that night. That you disappeared for a while." My mouth went dry. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" I didn't answer. He didn't ask again. He just stared at me, not angry, not even sad. Just searching. Like he was trying to find the version of me he thought he knew. And I couldn't meet his eyes. I just looked down and said, "I don't want to lie to you." That was the closest I ever came to telling the truth. He nodded. "Okay." And that was it. He didn't press. I didn't confess. We never spoke about it again. But something shifted. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the quiet. In the way he stopped reaching for my hand during movies. The way his hugs felt shorter. The way he left earlier for work and came home later. He didn't pull away entirely, but he didn't lean in either. It was like we were holding something delicate between us that neither of us wanted to touch. Maybe he suspected. Maybe he believed what he wanted to believe. But the truth is, even without knowing everything, he knew enough. And I think he forgave me for more than I'll ever admit. That's the worst part. Because I would have understood if he yelled, if he walked out, if he packed a bag and said, "You broke something I can't fix." But he didn't. He stayed. And every time he looks at me now, I feel the weight of what I stole from us. Not just trust, not just time, but the comfort of not having to wonder. Because now we both wonder, just in silence. Sometimes I catch him staring at me across the room, not coldly, not accusing, just distant, like he's looking at a painting he used to love, trying to remember what drew him to it in the first place. And I wonder what he sees. The wife who came home and kissed him like nothing happened? Or the woman who never told him the whole truth? The scariest part is, I'm not sure anymore. Because I think I became both. And now I just live between them.